Salt burned the wound, but not as much as the memory. That's what Elias Harrow told himself as he dragged his half-dead body through the sinking ruins of Santa Magdalena, a place where even the gulls had forgotten how to scream. The air stank of rust and rotting wood, thick with the scent of sea graves and something fouler still, regret. The sky above bled rust, casting long shadows over the reef-split bones of what used to be a Portuguese fortress. And there he walked, coatless, nameless, limping on a leg shattered beneath foreign cannons. In his hand, a locket that never left his chest, not even during the fire. Inside, the face of a boy, smiling, untouched, unknowing, gone. They called him a missionary in the nearby village of San Gabriel. They gave him bread, they let him pray, but they didn't see the flintlock tucked beneath his scripture or the bloodstains hidden under his collar. They didn't know what he had come to find or who he had come to face, because Elias was not searching for redemption. He was chasing a ghost that spoke through maps, whispers, and nightmares, a name that poisoned every sea it touched. Blackbeard. This is not just another pirate story. It's a confession soaked in vengeance, loss, and the price of a broken oath. The gold was cursed, yes, but it was his name they screamed in the dark. Welcome to the channel The Pirate's Diary. If tales of pirates, lost oaths, and cursed gold stir something in you, the sea keeps its stories, but only for those who dare to remember. Will you join the crew? Subscribe and step aboard. The flame trembled on the edge of the tavern's candle, its light barely clinging to the smoke-drenched air. Rain hammered the broken shingles above, a storm clawing to get in. Harrow sat alone at the corner table, eyes hollow, fingers still stained with salt and ash from the nets he'd mended that morning. He hadn't spoken in hours, but he listened. Every whisper in that cursed port crawled toward him like a dying thing. He marked each one inside a Bible that no longer spoke of God. Its pages had been carved hollow, filled instead with charcoal sketches, blood symbols, and maps soaked in salt water. It was his real scripture now, one stitched not with hope, but with warnings. They called this place San Gabriel, but no saint would walk these streets, only ghosts. By day, he pretended, kneeling at the chapel, mending fishermen's nets, helping with barrels and broken sails. The villagers offered bread, never questions. No one looked too long at the man with eyes like storm glass. No one noticed how he flinched at church bells or how he always faced the sea, even in sleep. But at night, he became what he truly was. A shadow among shadows. A man who had once worn a British officer's coat, now wrapped in silence and ruin. A man who had followed Blackbeard and lived. And that's what haunted him most. Not the blood, not the fire. The fact that he was the one left breathing. One night, as thunder cracked over the reef and lightning turned the tavern into a brief world of bones and silhouettes, a stranger appeared. No one saw him enter. No one spoke his name. He moved like smoke, settling across from Harrow without a word. His hands were scarred to the bone, fingers twisted as if broken more than once and never set right. But he held something that stopped Harrow's breath. A coin, heavy, dark, and scorched with Blackbeard's sigil, the horned skull etched in flame like it had been pulled from the devil's own forge. The man didn't blink as he slid it across the table. "You didn't get this from me," he rasped, voice like gravel soaked in rum and regret. He dropped something else, brittle parchment, edges burned, ink blurred from water and time, a map. "If you follow it," his eyes locked onto Harrow's, "leave your soul behind." The man left with the next gust of wind. No one saw him go. The tavern door didn't creak, the candle didn't flicker. Harrow was alone again, except for the map, the coin, and the rising ache in his chest. That night he did not sleep. He traced the jagged paths inked on the page, breathing slower with each name he recognized. Dead names, places erased from most charts. But the Claw Islands, those had never been printed on anything made by sane hands. No sailor dared speak of them aloud. They were not cursed. That would imply they had been blessed once. No, the Claw Islands were something else, something older. Legends said the sea didn't just drown men there. It swallowed them, whole, mind, body, and if you listened close enough, you could still hear them, calling from beneath the waves, voices that once begged for rescue, now begged to be forgotten. Harrow felt the pull, not greed, not anymore. He wasn't after gold. He was chasing silence, the kind only the sea could offer, the kind you earned by bleeding enough to pay for your sins. He closed the Bible, stood, and whispered to no one, "If I don't come back, let the sea keep my name." Outside, the rain had stopped, but the fog rolled in heavy, curling around the masts like hands dragging a corpse back into the tide. And far beyond the port, beyond maps, beyond prayer, something waited, something that remembered Elias Harrow, something that had once called him brother before betrayal burned that word to ash. Because Blackbeard never forgets, not the gold, not the blood, not the oaths broken in the dark, and the ghosts of San Gabriel. They never stopped whispering his name, not to curse him, but to warn the next fool who'd follow the same path. I buried my soul the day I left that island, but some things, not even the sea wants. The sand crumbled like bone dust beneath his boots. Blackbeard paused at the edge of the cove, the surf lapping in silence, too calm, too still. Above, a crimson moon bled into the clouds, casting long shadows across rotting sails and half-buried hulls. No treasure waited here, no battle, no glory, just ash. Not the kind born of fire. No, this ash came from something colder, something that had chosen to burn. Blackbeard bent down, ran 2 fingers through the soot. It clung to his skin like guilt. Behind him came 5, each marked, each loyal in ways only the broken could be. Amaro, one eye and no patience, ran a whetstone across his blade, even as he walked. He hadn't slept in 3 nights. He didn't need to. Steel was his rest, and his prayer. Lucia Torres, her eyes sharp as the ink on her maps, hadn't spoken a kind word in weeks. Her smile had died somewhere near Havana, buried with the last crewman she trusted. Briggs, silent, immense, once an executioner on land, now mute by choice. No one had ever heard his voice. But he had a way of making men confess just by stepping close. Mikkel, young and reckless, still called them brothers like it meant something, still believed in stories. He wouldn't last. And Jonas, the boatswain, never left Blackbeard's side. He watched, always watched, and what he saw, he never shared. They had come for fresh water, salted meat and time, just a pause between storms, but something was wrong. Even the gulls had flown inland. Even the wind refused to whisper. Blackbeard stood still, his hand resting on the grip of his pistol, not because he feared attack, but because he knew what kind of silence this was. Not the silence of peace, the silence of a trap remembering your name. "We shouldn't linger," Torres muttered. Her voice was low, flat, the way sailors speak, when they smell something dead before they see it. "This place, it's been stripped, not raided, erased," Mikkel scoffed, forcing a grin. "Maybe they just left in a hurry." Blackbeard turned to him, eyes black as the tide. "No one leaves ash in a hurry." He stepped further inland, past the palms warped by heat, the grass that refused to grow. Charred remains of a camp lay scattered, but the wood hadn't burned. It had withered, blackened from the inside out. Briggs knelt near a pile of bones. Child-sized. He said nothing, just looked up at Blackbeard as if to say, this wasn't pirates, this was something else. At the heart of the clearing stood a stake, rough, scorched. Carved into its side were symbols none of them recognized, except Jonas, who took one look and stepped back, eyes wide. Blackbeard didn't ask. He never asked. He just spoke to the wind. "He's already here." Lucia flinched. "Who?" But Blackbeard didn't answer, because you don't speak the name of the thing that watches. You smile, just to see if you'll still be smiling when it rips your tongue out. That night the fog came early, thick, heavy. It didn't roll in from the sea, it rose from the ground. By the time the fire was lit, Mikkel had vanished. No splash, no scream, just gone. His boots were still beside the barrel, his blade untouched. Lucia whispered prayers in a dialect no one recognized. Briggs stood with his axe, unmoving, like he was waiting for a noose to drop. And Amaro, who feared nothing, who laughed during storms and bled without complaint. He sharpened his blade slower now, because somewhere in the fog he saw someone smile back, someone wearing his own face. Jonas didn't sleep that night, neither did Blackbeard. He just stared into the fog, hands resting over the Bible stitched with human leather and wrapped in chain, the one he never opened unless death was near. "I've seen this before," he said, voice low, to no one in particular. "On the Ivory Coast, on a night just like this. Only 2 of us made it out." Briggs finally spoke. One word, raspy, heavy. "Devil." Blackbeard's lip curled. No, not a devil, something worse, something patient. And as the fire crackled, something whispered from the trees, not in words, but in laughter. It wasn't Mikkel, it wasn't human. Blackbeard smiled back, not out of courage, not out of defiance, but because he remembered. He remembered the last time a thing laughed like that. "I bled for that smile once," he muttered. "Never again." And the coin in his pocket, Blackbeard's own mark, turned warm, as if to say this was no longer about gold, this was about names. And the sea never forgets a name. The ink on her fingers hadn't dried, not even after 3 days of salt wind, ash rain, and prayer she no longer believed in. Lucia Torres stood beneath the dying light, the map still folded in her coat, the one she'd redrawn with hands that shook when no one was watching. She could feel it even now, the scratch of the quill, the weight of her brother's breath against the blade, the voice behind her that whispered, "Circle the cove, and he lives." She had obeyed. Blackbeard didn't ask questions, not out loud. He never did. But she felt it, the way his eyes slid over her too long, the way his shadow passed her like a warning. She hadn't slept since she drew the circle, not because of fear, because of doubt. She had chosen blood, but which blood? She didn't yet know. The others didn't suspect. Mikkel still called her. Hermana smiled like fools do when they believe in something. That night, he handed her a crude fishhook ring made from an old shackle. "For luck," he said. "Real families forged, not born." She wanted to tell him, wanted to scream, "Then why does it feel like I'm burning both?" But instead, she nodded and smiled, because that's what traitors do. They lie with their teeth, and they scream alone. The fire crackled in the middle of the clearing. Briggs sharpened his axe with slow, steady movements. Amaro cleaned a blade that had never dulled. Jonas, as always, said nothing, just watched. And Blackbeard sat in silence, staring into the flames as if they owed him something. A memory, a face, a name. The fire reflected in his eyes. But the fire in him? That had died the moment they stepped into this cursed cove. Lucia saw it clearly now, the quiet in his breath, the way he hadn't touched his flintlock since dusk. The devil of the Caribbean, the beast with storms in his veins. He looked tired, like a man who knew betrayal was near, but couldn't decide whose voice it would wear. The trap was set. She had marked the path, she had circled the cove, and now, somewhere in the darkness, they were coming. Not men, not navy, not anything that bled red. Just before midnight, the wind died, the kind of silence that makes even the sea forget to breathe. Lucia stood apart from the fire, hands tight at her sides. The fishhook ring bit into her skin, drawing a small crescent of blood. Barely visible in the moonlight. She watched the flames bend sideways, pulled by something unseen. Then, footsteps. Not one, not many, just one, dragging, deliberate. Amaro stood first, blade ready. Briggs didn't move. Jonas rose slowly. Blackbeard only whispered, "Too soon." Lucia's breath caught. Her lips parted, not to speak, but to confess. The truth sat at the edge of her throat like a blade, but Mikkel turned to her then, his eyes soft. "Storm's coming," he said, as if he could feel it. In his bones, she looked away, because she couldn't bear to see him die with trust still in his eyes. The footsteps stopped, and from the edge of the trees, a voice spoke, familiar and wrong all at once. Her brother's voice, but twisted, echoed, as if dragged from somewhere deep and cold. "Lucia," it called, "you chose me. Come see what that cost." She stepped back. The others turned to her now, Blackbeard's gaze locked like iron. "What did you do?" Amaro snarled. Lucia opened her mouth, but the forest answered for her. A scream, not of pain, but of teeth. A shape moved through the fog, not fast, not loud, just sure, something old, something called only when invited. The mark on the map wasn't a location, it was an offering. "I tried to save him," she whispered. Tears didn't fall. They had dried days ago, but Blackbeard's voice cut through her like a blade. "No, you gave us to it instead." The sky cracked open, thunder without lightning. The fog swallowed the fire. And in the dark, the map inside her coat began to burn, not from flame but from regret. Some ink doesn't wash off. Some circles, once drawn, summon more than fate. They summon what watches us smile, just to see when we stop. The first sound was rope hitting wood, soft, deceitful, like fishermen tying off a morning catch, but Dawn knew better. The sea held its breath as men stepped onto the dock, their eyes too hollow for hunger, their silence too tight for trade, hands wrapped in wet rope, faces low, clothes damp with the lie of labor. And then the nets fell and the flintlocks rose. The first shot didn't seek a heart. It struck the barrel of rum. Flame exploded like a scream denied too long, and with that the mask of peace burned away. The dock became a furnace, no time to ask who, no time to ask why, only fire and fury and the brutal knowing that everything was already too late. Lucia hit the ground first, not from force, from instinct. Her map-stained hands reached for a pistol she hadn't drawn in days, but she didn't fire, couldn't, because across the dock, through the curtain of smoke and sparks, she saw Mikkel, on his knees, blood streaking his face, trying to rise, trying to shout something, still calling out to them, not knowing that it was her hand that had opened the door. Then the fire cracked again, and Blackbeard moved. He didn't retreat, no orders, no hesitation. He charged. The beast returned, coat half burned and wrapped around his arm like a shield of ash. One blade drawn, eyes wild, voice broken from shouting names only ghosts still answered to. He reached Mikkel in 3 heartbeats, dragged him from the blast, threw him behind a shattered crate, then rose again through fire and powder smoke, as if made of the very thing trying to kill him. "Amaro!" he roared. "Flank them! Now!" Briggs appeared behind a splintered mast, dragging 2 down with the weight of his axe alone. Jonas vanished into the smoke, a ghost with a musket. The dock groaned, beneath the weight of death and decision. And Lucia crouched behind crates soaked in salt and regret. Her pistol trembled in her grip, not from fear, from shame. The men she betrayed, the ones she'd marked on the map with steady hands, were dying for each other, Not for gold, not for rank, for loyalty, for the kind of bond she'd forgotten existed, the kind that burns you clean or kills you whole. A body crashed beside her, one of the fishermen, or whoever they really were. His eyes wide, a hole where his throat used to be. She looked away and wept, not loud, not soft, just enough to feel it. She had thought betrayal would make her stronger, that saving her brother justified the rest. But now, as Blackbeard carved through smoke like it was his element, as Mikkel crawled bleeding and still looking for her, she understood something far worse. She had chosen the wrong blood. Blackbeard's voice cut through the fire. "Lucia, where the hell are you?" She didn't answer. Because how do you speak when your own name feels like poison? How do you rise when the men you sold are dying like brothers and you're just a shadow with ink-stained hands? The flames lit the sky like a second sunrise, and in that crucible of smoke, salt and sorrow, monsters were burned, but myths were born. The first bullet didn't hit a man. It hit the one thing they all trusted, the silence between them. And in that silence, I heard the truth. Some legends rise from loyalty, others from betrayal. The blade snapped with a sound like bone breaking under moonlight. Amaro didn't flinch. His knuckles bled, his chest was soaked, but he stood, shoulders square, legs shaking, one hand still clutching the broken hilt like it meant something. Around him smoke curled like mourning veils, shells screamed through the cove, and the sand drank from too many wounds. But Amaro didn't curse, didn't shout. He looked out to the sea, wide-eyed, breath stuttering, and begged it. Not for salvation, for forgiveness. A sailor's soul knows when the tide has turned, and Amaro knew. So he died where he stood, not as a killer, but as a man trying to mean something more than the weight of his blade. Not far from him, under shattered beams and falling ash, Mikkel dragged Jonas by the collar, blood streaking both of them, mouths full of smoke. Jonas had taken a shot to the shoulder, his coat torn open, eyes blinking through pain. He had stopped breathing twice, but Mikkel wouldn't let him. "Stay down." They moved through wreckage only they remembered, a narrow crevice behind the stone wall near the old salt barrels, a hiding place from younger days, from storms, from games no one plays after losing their first crewmate. "Here!" Mikkel gasped, shoving Jonas into the gap. Jonas tried to resist, didn't want to leave him, but Mikkel pressed a bloody hand against his chest. "Go!" His voice cracked. "You still have work to do." Jonas locked eyes with him, and Mikkel smiled. The kind of smile only fools or brothers give in the face of death. Then he turned, no armor, no chance, just a blade in one hand and a promise in the other. He didn't charge to win. He didn't scream. He walked, slow, steady, toward the men who were still coming through the smoke, eyes hollow, guns raised, one against many, but not to win, to matter. Behind the cove, behind bloodied crates and corpses too young to be called sailors, Lucia heard it all. She had not moved, could not. She heard Amaro's last breath, heard the scrape of Mikkel's boots as he faced death with nothing but conviction. She pressed her back to the wall, eyes shut, fists clenched so tight the fishhook ring cut her skin again. Jonas was safe, because Mikkel had believed in something bigger than betrayal. And Amaro, he had given his last strength not for gold, not for glory, but to die as something more than what the world called him. Lucia had drawn the map, opened the path, and now watched as those she betrayed burned themselves into legend. The storm came after, the kind that sweeps bones into the reef, erases names from the sand, and leaves only whispers behind. Jonas crawled through it alone, hand clutching his wound, teeth clenched, whispering the names of those who stayed behind so he wouldn't forget. Blackbeard was gone, Lucia vanished. But the sea remembered, And somewhere, beneath the waves and the ash and the screams that never quite fade, the tide carries this memory. A man died staring at the sea, not cursing it, but asking for mercy. And a boy became a myth, not by surviving, but by turning to face what no one else would. The bell had long since rusted. No chimes, no warnings. Only wind slipping through the cracks like a ghost too tired to haunt. High above the burning village, Elias Harrow stood in the old bell tower, one hand on cold stone, the other resting over a blade that hadn't moved in hours. His breath fogged the glassless window. Below him, chaos bloomed, fire licking. Rooftops, screams swallowed by musket fire, sails blackening with smoke. But his eyes weren't on the flames. They were fixed on a coat, long, charred, familiar, black. Just like the one from then. He saw the boy again, not in the streets, in memory. A harbor, years ago, another raid, another monster cloaked in night and legend, and a boy, barefoot, waving a wooden sword, shouting victory into the sky. His son. That laugh had been the last pure thing Harrow remembered. Before the smoke, before the screaming. Before the sea took everything, now he watched the same fire devour another shore, same panic, same ruin, and below, moving through it like a storm that had learned to walk, a pirate in black. Blackbeard, the name no one said lightly, the name that lived in every sailor's silence. Harrow gripped the edge of the tower until his knuckles bled white. He had followed that coat across oceans, through cursed waters, mutinies, and the kind of nights that make strong men forget their gods. He had killed for clues, buried brothers just to get closer, and now the man was right there. And Harrow couldn't move because something was wrong. He'd always believed in revenge, believed that if he made the pirate bleed, something inside him would finally go quiet. But watching now, seeing Blackbeard drag wounded crewmen behind carts, shout orders that saved lives, shield a boy from a collapsing beam. Harrow hesitated, not because he lacked the strength, but because for the first time he wasn't sure who the villain truly was. The streets below screamed for judgment. Lucia staggered through the alley, holding a torn map and blood-streaked journal. Briggs fell to one knee, covering fire for someone unseen. Jonas carried an injured child in one arm, musket in the other. And Blackbeard, the monster, the legend, fought like a man who had nothing left but duty. This wasn't slaughter, this wasn't greed, this was a stand. And Harrow, high above them all, hand trembling on his blade, realized something far colder than any blade could deliver. He had become the thing he once hunted, a shadow with no truth, a ghost that carried vengeance like a cross he no longer understood. He stepped back from the window. The bell tower groaned. Below, the fire roared louder, not in anger but as if mocking him, for chasing monsters so long. He had missed the moment he became one. The cemetery was silent, not with peace, but with the weight of forgotten things. Graves without names, crosses half swallowed by moss. The wind didn't howl, it held its breath. And there, beneath the cracked stone crucifix, Blackbeard waited, coat torn, one boot missing, eyes hollowed by smoke and time. He stood among the dead as if he belonged to them. Or worse, as if they were watching, no sword in hand, no pistol, just the ghost of a man who had fought too long and outlived too much. "You want vengeance?" he whispered. His voice was raw, not defiant, not afraid. "Take it, but do it quick, before the sea takes me back." Harrow stepped forward, pistol raised, fingers steady. But inside nothing was steady, not anymore. He'd chased this man through ports and storms, through whispers and graves. He'd buried friends along the path, buried parts of himself, and now here he was, facing the name he had sworn to erase. Blackbeard, the monster, the myth. And what stood before him was just a man, ruined, exhausted, bleeding salt from 100 old wounds. Harrow's breath caught, because Behind those hollow eyes, he saw something terrifying, recognition, as if they were mirrors now, both burned by choices, both too far gone to come back clean. He should have fired. He wanted to fire, but his hand shook. Not with mercy, with rage that no longer knew where to land. That heartbeat of hesitation was all it took. Blackbeard moved, not fast, not clean, but with the force of someone who knew the price of waiting. The two collided, no blades, no grace, into the dirt, into the bone. Fists, elbows, mud-slick knees, old pain ripping through flesh. They crashed into gravestones, split open cheeks on stone, tore at each other with everything they had left. Not a duel, not a dance, just rage made flesh. A storm broke above them. Rain slammed into the earth like judgment. Lightning carved the sky into veins. But beneath it all, in the mud and ash and forgotten graves, two men fought not for victory. They fought to bury the past. Harrow landed a punch that split Blackbeard's lip. Blackbeard spat blood, grinned. "Still think I'm the villain?" Harrow didn't answer, because the truth burned too deep to name. Somewhere nearby, the graves shifted under the storm. Wood cracked, earth groaned, the island felt alive, as if the dead were leaning in, as if they wanted to know who would join them. Blackbeard rolled away, coughing, chest heaving. Harrow crawled after him, pistol gone, blade forgotten. No weapons now, just hands, and history, and pain. Then, silence. No. Victor. No last breath. Only two men in the dirt, too broken to kill, too stubborn to stop. Rain washed the blood into the soil, and the crucifix above them cracked down the middle. The wind still howled, the storm still raged. But in that moment, with blood on the earth and fury between them, a cry cut through it all. "Stop!" Lucia's voice tore the sky like a musket's crack. She stumbled into the broken cemetery, soaked, shaking, breathless, and holding nothing but a small wooden cross in her hands. No weapon, no map, no shield, just a sliver of sacred cedar carved by hands long gone, its edges chipped, its weight light, but it carried more than wood. It carried the last piece of something that used to matter. She stood between the two men, one kneeling, one bleeding, both half dead with history, and she screamed, "This is all that's left." Her voice cracked. Fury and grief collapsed into each word. "Of anything holy on this cursed island, no gold, no crown, no treasure worth. The deaths, only this." She raised the cross, not like a relic, but like a warning. Then she threw it, hard, into the blood-soaked dirt between them. It landed with a hollow thud, wood against mud, truth against everything else, and the world went still. The wind died. The thunder paused, as if listening. Even the rain seemed to slow. Blackbeard froze, hand halfway to his belt. His breath hitched, not from pain, but from memory, of a chapel burned years ago, of a woman's lullaby drowned in smoke, of a time before the sea claimed everything. Harrow sank to his knees, not from wounds, but because he saw the boy again. Not laughing this time, but crying in a burning harbor. And in Blackbeard's face, he didn't see the monster anymore. He saw what was left of a man who had run too far, lost too much, and buried his soul somewhere no map could reach. He saw himself. Neither man moved, because something greater than vengeance had entered the fight. Not mercy, not forgiveness, but truth. Raw, simple, unbearable. The kind that leaves no victor, only silence. Lucia stood alone between them, trembling, soaked to the bone, her voice now just a whisper. It ends here, or it never ends. No one answered, because there was nothing left to say. A lone cross drifted beneath the waves, caught in the slow sway of forgotten tides, not tied to a grave, not nailed to wood, just floating, splintered, blackened, and carved with two letters time could not erase, E-H-E-T, above. the surface, shimmered under a dying sun. And in the distance, a ship burned, not in battle, not by cannon, but by decision. Smoke curled into the sky like a question that would never be answered. Jonas stood at the bow of Blackbeard's vessel, wind dragging the salt through his beard, eyes fixed on that distant fire. Lucia sat near the mast, fingers still stained with ink and guilt, the rolled map untouched in her satchel. Neither spoke, because words couldn't bring back what they'd lost. Amaro, Mikkel, Harrow, names that echoed differently now, not as crew, not as enemies, but as pieces torn from something that once felt like a family. Blackbeard hadn't said much since the duel beneath the cross, but the weight was there, in his silence, in the way he touched his coat in quiet moments. Inside, the saber cross rested, always near his heart. No one asked why, because even monsters have burdens, and some burdens don't speak. That night, under a pale moon and a wind that refused to carry songs, Lucia whispered, "He could have killed you." Blackbeard didn't turn, didn't blink, he just said, "He did." They never saw Harrow again. Some say he sailed into the jungle rivers of Cartagena, chasing silence deeper than the sea could offer. Others say the ocean took him, not as punishment, but as penance. But the truth, he was already gone the moment he handed back the cross and said, "Tell the sea, I'm done chasing ghosts." Years passed. Storms came and went. The crew scattered. Gold was found, lost, stolen again. But that cross, the one carved from sacred saber, the one that should have burned with the rest, was found by divers deep beneath coral and time, still intact, still heavy, not with value, but with memory. It held no gems, no map, no secret, just a wound that never healed, 2 sets of initials, a choice made in silence, and the proof that sometimes the real treasure isn't what we bury, but what we carry. Not all curses are cast by witches. Some are carved in wood, whispered in apologies, and worn close to the heart by men too feared to be forgiven. They say Blackbeard never took another crew like that again, never asked for loyalty, never gave it. He sailed differently, slower, quieter, as if haunted not by gold, but by a boy with a wooden sword and a man who disappeared instead of firing the last shot. Some claim Blackbeard's ghost still sails these waters, not for treasure, not for revenge, but searching for a moment he can't take back, a moment when a cross struck the dirt and nothing burned but the lies they all told themselves. Did you already know this forgotten part of the story? And if you had been on that ship, what would you have done? What other sea stories deserve to be told here before the tide buries them for good? If this story touched you in any way, don't let it vanish like so many other names the sea has taken. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep hearing what was never meant to be forgotten. Some books close, some ships sail away, but the sea remembers always.